So this is called, I couldn't find it. So I'm going to still have to search for it. For now, we'll just do it in Hebrew. You could use a book in Hebrew if you're comfortable. Otherwise, you could just listen. So what we're doing, this book over here is called Torah R. Okay.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, that's what we learn from every Shabbat in the morning.
Right, exactly. You learn it Shabbos in the morning. They have a shir over here. And so Torah R is a very special book. It's called the Hasidic Parsha, the Hasidic Parsha. Let me give you a little bit about what is Torah R, and we'll give you a bit of a flavor. Yesterday we spoke a little bit about it. I told you about the different types of talks. I don't remember. I'm doing a couple classes. I'm not sure what I said where, but I said that there was a unique time that happened since the Rebbe passed away. And I don't maybe remember which class I said that, but that the Torah came to a whole new dimension. I think it was here actually yesterday. And it was the number 22, which is 11 and plus 11, right? And Torah R also has this kind of uniqueness. It's like this tremendous inspirational flow. Now, something that's very interesting, I think I mentioned this one of the days, is that how many Hasidic books were published before the Rebbe took over. When the Rebbe came to America, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, gave him 3 missions. Yeah, one of them was Kahos, the Chabad publishing. The other was Merkaz Leone Chinuch, to kind of the Chabad outreach. Forgot what the third was. But in any event, before the Rebbe became the publisher of the Chabad books, how many Chabad books were published? Right, so we're talking about Chabad's dynasties going on already for 6 generations, and it's all about Hasidus and it's all about Torah. But how many books could you buy in the average store published Chabad Hasidus? Does anybody know?
You see, I think last time was only 93 that they published.
Right, a handful. There was Derech Mitzvasecha, there was Torah R, there was Likutei Torah, there was the Tanya, maybe Imrei Bina, a couple of books, right? Maybe 10 books or something. Okay. Today, you just look at the bookshelves here, Chabad books, hundreds of books, right? So we are fortunate to have many books, but we shouldn't forget that the books that were published were very, very fundamental books. So the Torah R, in fact, they say that the Tanya, the Torah R, and Likutei Torah, they are like the Torah Shebeksav. They are like the written Torah of Hasidus, just like the Torah has the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, 3 major books. So you have Tanya, Torah R, and Likutei Torah. Now, just a little bit of background. The Torah R was based on over 2,000 Maimarim. So what is a Maimar? As we know that the Alter Rebbe was put into prison because he was spreading, at least on high, he was spreading Hasidus, new revelation of light. I'm not sure why the darkness gets a free pass to spread darkness, but somehow the light, whenever you spread light, there's a accusation in heaven. I think it should go the other way around. We should accuse the darkness of spreading itself. The light should be allowed to spread. But be that as it may, the bottom line is that there was accusation in heaven and he went into jail. So the question is, what's going on here? What did he do different to the Baal Shem Tov? What happened? So the answer is that the Alter Rebbe began to spread Hasidus on a very, very major way. So if you look at the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, Baruch Hashem, we just completed a couple of quotes. Baal Shem Tov is very, very much quote format. A saying like, 2 of my favorite sayings of the Baal Shem Tov is, if you can find the good in the bad will turn to good. Try that in your life. Look at all the bad and find the good. If you can find the good in the bad will turn to good. Another great teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, which is not that well known, it says a person is walking to a river. Now, as you walk to the river, your shadow is very large, And then as you get closer and closer to the river, it gets smaller. And as you bend down to the river, it's getting smaller. And then you look at the river face to face, you have the same thing. It says if you approach relationships, including your relationship with God, but you're very big, you're egotistical, so then what comes back at you is also a lot of ego. But if you approach it with humility, what comes back to you is your face, your own humility comes back to you. So it's a beautiful teaching. But as you can see, they're very poignant, a lot of information, but just like a point. But you look at the Maimarim now of the Alter Rebbe, here's one Maimer, it's like 5 columns. It's not a point, it's a whole story. And this is what makes Chabad different to the other. You may be wondering what makes us unique. So to a large extent, what makes Chabad unique is the amount and the style of the Chassidus. Because all the Rebbes, all the great holy Rebbes, they all said Chassidus, but the Chassidus was very similar. In fact, today, it was published in the Dvar Malchus, was very interesting that the Rebbe wrote a letter to his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe. Rebbe actually had a very interesting upbringing. It wasn't a typical Hasidic upbringing, because his father was a chief rabbi of a very secular city, Yekaterinslav. So he grew up in kind of, it was like if you'd imagine Odessa or imagine Boston, he grew up in like a cultural town. And yet, of course, the Rebbe, his kol kula day and night was Chassidus in Torah. But he actually writes to the Rebbe that he had certain gaps in his education because he didn't grow up in a Hasidic community, people having farbrengens and giving Hasidic stories, and he wanted to fill in these gaps. And he wrote to the Rebbe his Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, a very interesting question. And his question was: it seems that the way of the Polish Hasidim, that these great, Polish Tzaddikim, these great Tzaddikim, you have so many dynasties, even here, Ger and Bobov and Sanz, all these holy tzaddikim, they seem like their way is closer to the way of the Baal Shem Tov. So the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote back to him. He says, really, it deserves like a whole book on its own, why Chabad is in fact closer. But he says, I just want to tell you something that I heard from my father, which he heard it from his father, going back to the Alter Rebbe, which is that the Alter Rebbe said about Baruch of Mezhebush there was a bit of a, I don't want to use the word conflict, but a bit of a disagreement between the Alter Rebbe and the Baruch of Mezhebush. In fact, there's a famous, talking about Baruch, look who walks in.
I'm waiting outside for you to say that.
In fact,
You were sitting in the dock.
let's get you a chair. Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have a chair here. So, Baruch of Mezhebush, there was a kind of a teaching, if you want to call it a teaching. There was a kind of a line that Mashiach will come either from the youngest or the oldest of the Talmidim of the Maggid. So the youngest Talmud of the Maggid was the Alter Rebbe. And just out of interest, very interesting, there was once the Talmidei of the Maggid, they were all sleeping, right? So after the Baal Shem Tov was the Maggid, and they were all very great tzaddikim, they all became dynasties. And they were sleeping, and the Alter Rebbe was there. He was on the floor with them all, and I guess the Maggid thought they were all sleeping, but of course they were not all sleeping. And he said, amazing how Hashem Elokai Yisrael is in such a small body. And so when the other Talmidim heard this, they realized Alter Rebbe is very unique. He became the leader of all the tzaddikim when Menachem Mendel took over from the Maggid came. In fact, they say that he came to Tzfat. I don't know if you've ever had this problem, but he couldn't sleep at night because the angels in Tzfat are very, very loud. They're making tumults the whole night. They're making tumults. And he,
Kids are in my building.
and he and his holy chevra couldn't sleep. So they went to Tveria, and over there the angels are a little quieter, so he was able to sleep. But that's the story. Interestingly enough, I read it. Actually, his grave is in Tveria, and I read it that they say that he went to Pekin. Pekin is where the Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and the Samach Mem came to him and said, if you don't leave Pekin immediately, I will abandon everything that I have, and I will just focus on destroying you and your followers. They picked up their bags and they left. And he said from then, he realized how precious is a new yishuv. It's very interesting. Every group in the Jewish community adds a certain nuance to the Jewish, if you want to call it culture, but more than culture, the worldview. For example, we learned from the Mizrahi the importance of Eretz Yisrael. From Chabad, you learn the importance of Avas Yisrael. Maybe from Breslov, you learn the importance of Simcha and B'tachin, Every group is adding a very important flavor, which, interestingly, ironically, somebody once spoke about. I think it was whether it was Satmar or something that was very against some of the secularism of the government. And the Rebbe said, had they not been so loud about it, I would have had to say more. But like the way of Chabad is, we're into Davis. Everybody's bringing a certain nuance into the cholent pot of what needs to be focused on. So be that as it may, there's a prophecy that Mashiach would come from the oldest, either the oldest or the youngest Talmud of the Maggid. The oldest Talmud was, if I'm not mistaken, Nachum Chernobler. And so the Alter Rebbe said to Nachum Chernobler, why should there be an argument between us who Mashiach should come? Let's make a shidduch. So he went to Nachum Chernobler, and he had a whole bunch of, I think they were great-grandkids, in a bunch of cots in his home. The olden days, everybody kind of bunched together. And Alter Rebbe felt, he said, choose one. He felt the heads, and he said, this one. And that one eventually became what's called the Cherkasser. He became a Rebbe, and he married the daughter of the Mittler Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was a descendant of that. It's very interesting because, obviously, many of us refer to Rebbe as Mashiach, but the Rebbe always referred to the previous Rebbe as Mashiach. And as I said before, Mashiach's going to come. They're all going to be Mashiach. They all have certainly the leadership and aspect of Mashiach. In fact, the Rebbe speaks on one of the sichas that will say, here's Mashiach, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he says, and the main one, David HaMelech. It's an interesting thing. So all of this is to say the uniqueness of Chabad. So how did Chabad, in a way, diverge? So Chabad, after the Alter Rebbe was released from prison, or while he was in prison, the Maggid and Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov came to him, and he asked, why am I in prison? From spiritually. So he said, because there's this gzeira, there's this decree against you releasing so much chassidut. So he said, does that mean I should stop? And he said, no, you're going to be released. It's a sign that you've been exonerated. And in fact, you should increase. And since then, apart from Breslov, where there's a lot, the Torah of Reb Nachman is quite, but even so, it's not as lengthy as Chabad Chassidus. Chabad Chassidus is Chochmah bin Adas. It's not so much about the emotions. Now, what's very interesting is that Alter Rebbe said about Baruch Mezhebush, there was a little bit of a disagreement. He said that he is the physical grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, but I am the spiritual grandson. I was thinking about that today. What does that actually mean? And I think it means that, in other words, what was the essence? And every time that a person, they say Pnimius ben Chitzonius av. Sometimes you might have you say, my son, he behaves in such a way. You know why he behaves in such a way? Because you behave in such a way. But the question is, I don't behave in such a way. Yeah, but you want to behave in such a way. In other words, a child picks up the essence of the father. And he becomes, that's why I say many times people become religious. I say to the parent, wow, you did a good job. In fact, there's a lady in Kansas City where all three of her children became frum. I said to her, how did that happen? Because she and her husband were not religious. She said, well, you think it just happened? I used to take my kids to Jewish events. In other words, she may not have been religious, but she showed her kids the importance of religion. So her children took it to the next level. Okay, it's important to you. The other guy, let's say his kid, he's into, but I'm not saying that people can't change, but I'm saying there's a certain truth to that. So to look at the behavior of the Baal Shem Tov, sure, maybe other Rebbes, and not putting them down, they're very big. The behavior is closer to the behavior of the Baal Shem Tov. But the essential of which this was the thought that came to me, which is basically revealing the essential core of Hashem, the essential of a Jew. I just read this recently that I think was from the Rebbes. I said the whole goal of the Baal Shem Tov was to reveal what a Jew is. Right? That kind of unconditional regard for a fellow Jew. We find this most by the Rebbes, as a Rebbe once said that, Rebbe said that we all follow the way of the Baal Shem Tov, but the Rebbe follows it the most. And so it may not look on an outward level to be like that, but on the inward level, it is exactly like what would the Baal Shem Tov be doing in 2004? Exactly what the Rebbe was doing. So, okay, so that's the word. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek collected from over 2,000 Maimarim, and these are the Maimarim. They printed. It was not simple to print, by the way. The first book, I think, was called, I'm not sure if Likutei Torah. Yeah, Torah was firstly printed. And then in Russia, unfortunately, I think it was from what's called a Musar, so Jews that had renegated. So they kind of shut down the printing presses. And so it was only many years later that they printed Likutei Torah. And in fact, the Tzemach Tzedek had a dream that the Alter Rebbe, I think it was Alter Rebbe, came to him and told him to put his footnotes. That's why you'll notice Torah is a little bit not as thick. I'll show it to you to get a visual So here's Likutei Torah. You see that Likutei Torah is a little bit thicker, right? So in Likutei Torah is actually the if you want to call it the footnotes of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he didn't want to print it. I guess he was humble, but a couple of his sons who are also tzaddikim also had that dream, so he was busted and he had to print it, and therefore we have more of the footnotes of the Tzemach Tzedek here. Interestingly enough, the Rebbe made a index of Torah and Likutei Torah. In the back, you'll find an index of the Rebbe. And this is called the Chassidish Parsha. And as I mentioned before, that these were the main svarim of Chassidus. And many Chassidim, they would learn this every single week. They would go through it. And so it's a very great thing. We have a big schus that in the Tzemach Tzedek Kol established that we're going to study the Maimarim, written basically collected by the Tzemach Tzedek. And hopefully those who enjoy will try to do it maybe from like 1 to 1:30, and 1:30 to 2 we'll do the other, the Sikha of the Rebbe. And many times, interestingly enough, the two correlate. The Sikha of the Rebbe, the main point of the Sikha is really coming from here, from Torah. It's just the Rebbe expands on that point in a very beautiful way. Again, it's a little bit esoteric. To really benefit from this, you have to kind of, maybe we should actually do it. I've taken out many times quotes on the Sikha, so if you just go through it straight, it will be quite lengthy. The time won't really give us enough time to do it. So maybe what I'll do is actually I'll go to my website where I took out quotes from the mimer, and we'll get a little bit. We'll accomplish, I think, a lot more if we just go to the quote section. Hold on one second. So, special thank you, Pesach, for the benefit of your hotspot. Mimer.
You know what they call hotspots in South Africa?
What?
High crimes
Hotspots,
sections.
yeah.
Hotspots.
Okay, so fine. There's let's see here. Okay, so there's a mimer in Tolbeh, it's a very famous mimer called Mayim Rabim. And I don't have quotes on that mimer, but what I do have,
I can't read it anyway.
what I do have is, what I do have
Send you to sleep.
is quotes from a Rebbe mimer, which is based on this mimer. So what I'm going to actually do is read you some quotes from the Rebbe mimer. If you want, I can send you the link, and then you can follow along. Do you want me to do that?
Is that any use?
Let me see that. No, not really. Not really. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you these quotes right now. So if you want to follow along,
Send the link.
I'm going to send you a link. Here's my.
No, I don't see anything this side.
You don't see it, huh? Okay.
So none of that is any good.
Well, it's good in Hebrew.
Yeah, but I can transfer it to English, but I just wondered whether
Are you sure you can
I
transfer it?
can follow it on here.
I don't think it has an English translation. Some of them do, some of them don't, but not Torah R. You'll see on the top, it'll give you an English letter if you could transfer it to English, but I don't think that one's going to have English letter because the book has to be,
Sifriya.
Yeah.
Sifriya.
yeah.
Watch Sifriya and no Sifriya.
Because it's called Safari.
So no point in me trying to start reading Torah all with this.
Toronto.
Then.
Um,
Good for someone.
Like a library, I figured it was. or something.
Well, I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to do the quotes in any event in English. And let me just send it to, I put it on our little group here. And then Pesach, I'm going to send it to you.
So the message is if you speak English, tough luck.
Basically, that's the answer.
I don't speak English.
Yeah, but you speak Americanese.
Yeah, but I'm in bigger trouble because I'm Canadian and he's also.
Oh, I see.
So what's the point of me sitting here then?
We're doing it in English,
Listen to
David.
By ear.
We're doing it in English. That's the point. You're getting it in English.
Then I leave here, I can't listen to it.
So you got to listen and remember.
Did you
I'm
send,
also doing the same thing.
I just sent everybody the quote, okay?
Okay.
The link.
oh, I.
And you can follow along in English if you want, okay? It's on the Koilo group. I think you're on the Koilo group, are you not?
What?
There's a little Koilo group made, yeah?
Mine
Yeah.
Rabim.
Yeah, Mayim Rabim, yeah. Okay, so this is a mimer from the Rebbe, Mayim Rabim. And it go based on a pasuk. I'm going to go a little bit quickly because we're a little bit out of time. So I want to be able to go through it. So I'm going to go a little quickly. The verse says, great waters can never extinguish the love between God and the Jewish people. Now, the classic teaching is actually on Noach, that even the difficulties that we go through in life, what they really do is they elevate our soul to a level like the Teva. It may be great water. Sometimes we're stressed about money or other things, but actually they don't, not only do they not extinguish, they actually lift your soul higher. Sometimes when physically things are a little bit under pressure, your soul actually becomes more revealed. God says, even if all the nations of the world gather against the Jews, is very appropriate for our times. My love for them is unconditional. If a man will give all his earnings to acquire Torah, then all the booty of the war of Gog and Magog will be his. So
Amen.
there's a lot of booty. You think
Expected.
about there's a when the Jews left Egypt, they left with all they said kimitzuda shein b'dagan, like a net that they took out all the fish. So they cleaned it out. So there have been countries that have been accumulating a lot of wealth because one day it's going to be transferred into your bank account.
Amen.
Because the
Amen.
war of Gog and Magog is that money is not really intended for them. It's intended for the Jewish people as a reward. When all the heavenly kings representing countries on earth gather to complain against the Jews,
Like now.
like there is but one nation and she is low in her merits, that's what they're saying, then Michal, the defense attorney for the Jews, will say, if she remains strong like a wall and marries not in the nations, she should be saved. And even if she is low in merits, meaning even if she doesn't merit, but in the merit of the Torah study of the children whose hearts are pure, then she will be saved. And of course, you have so many thousands and hundreds of thousands of little Jewish children learning Torah, so things are good. She is like a little sister. Just as parents anger themselves not at a child as she is young, I put in my brackets cute, so too God says the Jewish people are like my child. So Hashem's saying, like, I don't care. Even if they do everything wrong, but your child, you don't care. It's, the teacher tells you your child is misbehaving. You say, bad teacher you are. My child's a beautiful, adorable kid. So Hashem says, I love them. They're unconditionally loved. I don't care what you say. There's another explanation on this verse as follows. This verse refers to one's unquenchable desire for God. And even all the meditations, all the revelations on God's greatness, even those seen in heaven cannot quench this thirst. Okay. In other words, this is a famous teaching of the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe would very often say, Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden. I don't want your Gan Eden. He's telling this to God. I don't want your Gan Eden. I don't want your Olam Haba. And the Rebbe says, remember, you and I, when we speak about Gan Eden, there's not much that we understand. The Alter Rebbe understood. The Alter Rebbe actually couldn't even write the word Atzilus. In ecstasy, it was so great. So the Alter Rebbe knew how great these levels were. And he's saying, I don't want it all because I just want you alone. So even if God gives you the greatest revelations and you see so much, you're like, Hashem, I just want you. Ironically, there's a Sikha of the Rebbe that we were kind of learning, which is that Hashem is simple. The revelation of Hashem is like the still small voice. It's not complex. It's more like your guide, direction. It's just an unconditional acceptance of you unconditionally and here to try to help you grow. That's a side note. But the point here is that no matter what kind of revelations you get from God, your thirst for him is still even greater. The only thing that quenches it is Torah mitzvahs. For when we do Torah mitzvahs, though we see it not, God himself manifests. So this is one of the famous teachings that Torah mitzvahs says, even if you received all of heaven, right, all the rewards of heaven, heaven, what is heaven ultimately? It's Chassidus. You're seeing light of God. You're understanding greater comprehension. The Tzemach Tzedek, not Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Rashab once came out of his room and he says, I was just in Gan Eden for 3 hours. And he was learning Torah and Likutei Torah, because that's what you learn in Gan Eden. You learn the secrets of the Torah. But still, they say 1 hour on earth is better, of Tshuva Ma'aseh, better than all of heaven. Why? Because on earth, let's say when you do a mitzvah, the classic example is, let's say there's a professor, I don't know, Einstein and a little boy. Now, they have nothing in common. Einstein's this genius. He's thinking about his equations. The little boy is thinking about his toy cars or whatever it is. But then Einstein says, do me a favor. Can you get me a cup of water? And the little boy is like, yeah, of course, get you a cup of water. In fact, it's an amazing experience because through the boy giving a cup of water to Einstein, the two became connected. And the same thing as Hashem says, do me a favor. I have a mitzvah. Can you do the mitzvah? And you say yes. So even though Hashem is so great, but the mitzvah is called tzivah, you have an internal connection to Hashem now, and now the two of you are connected. So doing the Torah mitzvahs actually brings you into a connection point. And that's even greater than all the information you can have. And that's why every single Jew is so precious, because we could all do Torah mitzvahs. You don't have to be a genius. To any Torah you study, in any mitzvah you do, you automatically have a deep bond with Hashem. God says, you have made me to be one on earth, and I will make you one too. In the explanation of one, there are 3 explanations in this word echad. Number one means unique. Number 2, one is to exclude idolatry. And number 3, mitzvah of divine singularity, what's called achdus Hashem. In other words, there is nothing but. God watches not only the highest heavens, but even the lowest steps, amoeba at the bottom of an ocean. For the gap between and the finite, even the highest heaven is infinite. And hence the infinite, being unlimited, can simultaneously be beyond and have infinite perception. So as Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, an example of Hashem's perception of reality, it's like you are aware, okay, it's hot, my toe is bothering me, I have to pay this bill. You have a couple of, because it's all internal. You can be aware of multiple internal things at the same time. Now, if you were to explain to me everything you're aware of, it would take some time, because I don't have your internal feelings. So Hashem internally knows everything that's going on because it's all coming from Him. The idea of idolatry is attributing any power to any being. So those say God uses the sun, but to give the sun honor when it is literally like an axe in the hand of the woodcutter, in other words, it has no freedom. And similarly, all forces in the world that contribute to a person's finances only come from God. Hence, one should never bow to these forces, though one may need to do them. In other words, one's main intent should be to be able to give charity, educate one's children, study Torah, and do mitzvahs, and not let the means become an end. And this is really the key difference. This is the whole thing of the world. Do we allow, the Baal Shem Tov says, every single thing that exists can be used for the good or the bad. If the thing gives you ego, even let's say, something as simple as, croissants, if you, oh, wow, what a croissant you got. If you go to Netanya, Tanya's become it's like a French Jews over there. And these guys, they know their food. They know these beautiful bakeries. And you look and wow, it's an art form. So if your cake is like a whole event, then it's not so kosher. In fact, I think the Rebbe Rashab said about the French, they're Bali Taivas, they're into their desires, their animal souls, very strong there. The Germans are into their ego and the French are into their. So, but the flip side is, look, cake could be a farbrengen. We're sitting together, we're having a piece of cake together, we're making so in that sense, it's a good thing. So everything in this world has to be seen as its part. This world is a big farbrengen. The Rebbe says the first thing Mashiach is going to do is he's going to make a farbrengen. It's one big farbrengen. So if you think about life as a farbrengen, everything's a farbrengen. Sometimes you're farbrengen with your wife, sometimes with your kids, sometimes with your community. When you're eating as a farbrengen. They say, what's the difference between a Jew who drinks and a drunk? Is a Jew says l'chaim to someone else. Right? So if everything is just about filling myself up because whatever, I'm not feeling so great, so I need to feel a little bit better. So I need the most fancy thing that's making my ego feel a little bit better about myself. But on the flip side, if you think about, wow, we're just partying together, we're having a farbrengen together, and it's beautiful because the ultimate thing of life is unity. And so everything is creating unity. Money is unity. I'm giving stucco. We're having good. So it's one big farbrengen.
My brother used to say, in Israel, you have all the time some celebration.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There was actually a Misnagid that once said to one of the Misnagid of Shekadailim, he said, the Chabad, they made this new Yom Tov, Yutes Kislev, the Rebbe Rashab, it's Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. It says in the Mishnah of 4, now they made a 5th. He said, by Zay Kumsu, they're adding. So this is the goal. Mashiach is going to come. The Rebbe says is we're going to have new Yomim Tovim. Not only are we have new Yom Tovim, we're going to have such Yomim Tovim that they're going to make the Yom Tovs that we have look like nothing. Some people make a mistake because it says that all the Yom Tovim will be batul. We won't have them except for Purim and Yom Kippur. It doesn't mean they'll be batul because nothing in the Torah goes away. It means according to the greatness of the celebration of Mashiach. Now imagine going out of Egypt doesn't look like nothing compared to what Hashem's going to do. Resurrection of the dead, clouds coming down, bringing us all to Israel, everybody getting their own beautiful little plot of land. Beis Hamikdash. So it's going to be so amazing that there's going to be new festivals celebrating Mashiach. In fact, it says that Shiva Asar B'Tammuz will be the first day of Yom Tov, Tisha B'Av will be the last day of Yom Tov, and Chol HaMoed will be the 3 weeks in between. Yeah, you want to say something?
There is a resurrection of the dead. Hashem did it twice at Mount Sinai.
That's true. Well said. He did do it twice at Mount Sinai. He resurrected us.
That's right, because he spoke to the people that died.
Yeah,
And
correct.
when the angels had to put his souls back, when he spoke again, then they said, whoa, whoa, whoa. But
Yeah.
they said to Moses, you speak to Hashem. And then because you can take it, we can't take it. We die every time we listen to Hashem.
Yeah, and it was called Tal Tchiyah, that there's a dew that has the ability to revive. Tchiyas Mason. It's interesting. It's brought down different places. Tchiyas Mason, Tal Tchiyah is actually Chassidus. And in Chassidus, it revives. It's brought down that humility, iskafia, humility, bittul, iskafia. These are things that bring about Tchiyas Mason. Basically, when we touch, because even a person that's humble can beat what's called chibut hakever. Unfortunately, if it passes away, worms can eat. But many times tzaddikim, but this even from people the Chevra Kadisha, they move people 20 years later. Not necessarily
just dried
tzaddikim
out.
or maybe even not religious Jews, but their body was complete because if a person has this quality of humility, then it's like the Rebbe says. It says nafshi ka'afela kol tia, when your soul is like dust to everyone. So all these things are only to humble the person. But if the person is humble already, then Hashem doesn't have to humble them. When they moved the Rebbe Shab 20 years after he had passed on, he not only was he perfectly, not only was his body perfect, but it was actually warm because they had to move him because there was a highway that they were building. So this is, in fact, over here we have the Menachem Mendel, who was buried, the son of the Rebbe Marash. He was a brother of the Rebbe Rashab. He also was moved about 20 years later. His body was also complete. I'm not sure. Warming up, it was complete. So, okay, so I just wanted to conclude. We're kind of running out of time, but I just want to conclude with this concept of what the festivals of Mashiach. So it's not the Chas v'Shalom we won't have Pesach, but Pesach is about Iskafia. Mashiach is about Ishapcha. Mashiach is about a whole new world where the whole world integrates. Like nothing in the world becomes. This is one of the beautiful things. I can say that about the Rebbe. One of the things that is amazing about the Rebbe is that the Rebbe didn't live a life where the physical world was a stira. The physical world was a conflict to the spiritual world, right? Many groups, religious groups, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, they have this question of how do I deal with the modern world, right? You have certain people that don't even get involved in the modern world. And there are all these different things, and not condemning or anything, but ultimately, everything that Hashem made, He made it for His honor. So if Hashem made the radio is not a negative tool. Somebody just told me this morning that when the Rebbe, he was Thanksgiving, we're coming up to Thanksgiving tonight. So when the Rebbe, I think the Rebbe mentioned Thanksgiving in a positive way, in fact. So when the Rebbe would come home at Tzai Shabbos, he would turn on the radio and listen. My grandfather had a radio show that he would do, say the Tanya. And the Rebbe was very promoting of using technology for the sake of Kedusha. So it's a little bit of a very important shift because the idea, and particularly many of us came from a secular background, so we don't have discomfort in the secular world. But the idea of when you come from a religious background, you can look at the secular world, oh, it's treif. But actually the secular world is what we call klippus negus, not treif. It is. It's a question like money. money is. The
Yeah.
question is, what are you using it for? Food is. What are you using it for? So that's Mashiach. Mashiach is a world in which you're just able to focus on the deeper meaning of everything and everyone, including ourselves.
Mhm.
So in conclusion, just to conclude for something, the Sikha, the Rebbe, the other told the Sikha, but I kind of reviewed it yesterday, so it's a very important idea. The Rebbe really speaks about the idea we kind of spoke about a little bit this morning of Maida Ani. The first word of Maida Ani is Maida. Now, this is a very important principle. The Rebbe says being a Jew effectively is two things: is having bittul and hoidah. Bittul is humility to Hashem, because there are others that know about Hashem, but being a Jew is that you're humble to Hashem, you're following what He wants you to do. And also to be grateful to Hashem. This quality of humility and gratitude is very important. And that's in the word Maida, which Maida actually has a connotation of both, but also Maida is the gematria 55, which is Hein. It says Hein la Hashem Elokecha, that it represents the essence of the soul. We know there are 5 names to the soul: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. But Chamish Hashem is Nikula, the soul is called by 5 names. So it means the soul, if I say your name is Yochanan, but you are not Yochanan, Yochanan has a name called Yochanan. You have a name called Yochanan. If you are talking to yourself, you don't say Yochanan, because you don't have to refer to yourself by the name. It's only an outside thing using a name. And so also Hashem has many names, but the essence of Hashem is nameless, right? And so the essence of you and the essence of Hashem is one entity. And recognizing that, allowing that to become your identity and flow, the first thing that you do is understand that that is your identity, that is the source of everything else, and everything else flows from there. And so, in conclusion, what's going to happen when Mashiach comes? We're going to have new festivals celebrating the coming out of Mashiach, and ultimately we're going to integrate all this knowledge. Everything that we learn will be integrated in our behavior and our life. It will be a great Farbrengen. Any questions?
I heard that Yehudi
Yes.
means Hashem.
Yehudi, yes, yeah. Pam Oida as Hashem. She named
We are
Yehuda
here
Yehuda.
to praise Hashem.
Nice, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
It's just another thing, it's a slight error. It's not twice that Hashem is resurrected, it's 3 times. Because there was one tribe, but half of them left, and 1,000 years later
yes,
was
tribe of Ephraim,
Gabriel
correct.
or something came
Yes,
to
yes.
come there, and Hashem resurrected them 3
Resurrected,
times.
yeah.
Forgot the other one. So
Yeah.
I'm in error.
Yeah, no, yeah. That I mean, there are other resurrections on a more.
But in a group,
Yeah, it's a group. It's true. That was the 3 times. Hatzamas hayaveshos. Right.
the same thing with,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but there's 3 times also when the students, there's 24,000 were died.
Yeah.
And then it was when I think Levi and Shimon, when they wiped out, it was also 24,000.
Yeah.
And then there was another one, there's another 24,000.
24?
It was when, what was it?
Students of Rabbi Akiva.
Rabbi Akiva, when he was 24,000. And then there was 24,000 with, I think with the 2 brothers, when they wiped